Last week we heard part one of a long talk with Gill Freightlines small fleet owner Surinder Gill, with 4 trucks owned and headquartered out of Manteca, California, where Gill's following on his owner-operator father's 60-year trucking legacy, honored on the back of Gill Freightlines dry vans. In the wake of the Convoy brokerage's collapse last fall, as noted in last week's podcast, Gill's still yet to be paid for around $35,000 worth of loads hauled pre-collapse, dedicated freight he'd been on for quite a while. He calls it, in part, a classic mistake on his part.
And I guess it goes back to, the age-old saying of don't put all your eggs into one basket.
Classic mistake in some ways, anyway, but systemically he proffered the notion that given how much freight went unpaid in the Convoy collapse and the company's tech platform's quick sale to another brokerage and forwarder, bigger brokerages ought to be required to have larger bonds in place based on the amount of business they do. That was part one of this 2-part edition of Overdrive Radio. I'm Todd Dills, and in part 2 we're going to get a window into what Gill's doing in the aftermath, pivots he's making toward more direct business, and his hope the too many shippers' attitude toward working with small carriers in their immediate physical vicinity might change for the better.
I can see them physically, they can see me physically. But yet what confuses me is they would rather give work to these, kids out of college who work for Coyote in Chicago or in Atlanta, wherever their office is, and trust these kids to go vet these carriers who might be carriers or chameleon carriers to haul their product, but they won't give it to me because I have 5 trucks only and I'm down the street.
Though load boards and brokers themselves in part rose out of the need of owner-operators and small carriers to connect to freight they otherwise might not have access to, Gill feels the entire culture around brokerage has devolved with Wolf of Wall Street type tactics, now so dominant that independents become essentially bottom feeders, quote unquote, in a market like the current one. Volumes are down post-pandemic and demand having sunk back to pre-2020 levels and below, some would say, for an extended period.
You'll call on this lane and they'd be like, hey, how about this load that's 300-mile round trip? All right, we can only pay you $200. I'm like, all right, dude, good luck. 3 hours later, it's still sitting on the load board. And they've only went up $25. 4 hours later, they're still sitting on the load board and they'll be like, well, my absolute best is $50 more. All right, now it's 30 minutes to go till the load picks up, and then now they'll post it for $900. It's like, Jesus.
Surinder Gill is in it for the long run, though, as noted. Complaints about those sorts of approaches on the boards don't mean he's not fully invested in driving change in his own approach to customers. He recognizes his and other independent shortcomings and is committed to being a part of the change to re-engage direct customers, really put in the work on building relationships toward better long-term opportunity outside of this or that fancy new brokerage network's app.
It's going to drive a change, and I want to be there for it.
On the other side of a break, then, we'll dive into his post-Convoy moves to sharpen the business. So keep tuned.
This spring, increase rig power and performance with Howe's Diesel Defender. It's warranty safe and made with no alcohol or harmful solvents to keep you running at your best. It provides maximum lubricity and specialized IDX4 detergent cleans and prevents deposits. It safely removes harmful water and even provides a 5% increase in fuel economy or more guaranteed. Grab a bottle today at retailers and truck stops nationwide and visit HowesProducts.com for more information.
Visit HOWES, HowesProducts.com, for much more information about the company's fuel treatments, Howes multipurpose, and more. As noted, Surinder Gill's in it for the long haul, he said, here describing his own increasing attention to setting up the business for just that, in the wake of Convoy's demise.
We fared through, we're not the ones that threw in the towel and said, all right, we're going to belly up too. Of course not. The people that work with us, they got families to support. We were able to find some new lanes for our guys and keep them busy. We're talking October, and what's now April, so it's been 6 months, right? So 6 months later, we're still doing what we're doing. We added on more equipment. We now took some of the headache that Convoy was taking for us, and now it kind of helps me build a smarter and sharper strategy for our company going forward. How much to put your eggs in a basket with a broker, to look at the finances, to look at these quick pay deals. Because I was one of the carriers that was like, oh, I'm not paying you guys 1%, 2%, 3%. Through that.
Right.
I worked too hard to negotiate these rates. We're going to keep you on a 30-day cycle. Now I'm more of, all right, let me try to get my money from wherever, because I don't trust anybody now. I don't care if you're C.H. Robinson or, Knight Logistics or whomever else, because this industry is it's become so saturated with double brokering, payment issues, PQL, people like that. I read an article, I think last year, about them holding a carrier's money due to a claim.
And not just the money for the load where the claim was in question. That article Gill referenced there was one in Overdrive about the cargo claims offsetting contract language brokers often use to reserve the quote-unquote right to essentially withhold payment on any carrier's loads to satisfy shipper claims of damage. It's an oft-abused practice various players in and around small trucking have been warning carriers to avoid like the plague in their contracts with brokers.
So what's to say that it was like $1,000 claim, that now he's juped out of his other financials.
Gill then told another story about several months' worth of TQL loads he'd not been paid for that turned out were held up within another carrier's factoring company. Turned out it was a case of mistaken identity. TQL was doing some drayage business with a Gill Freightlines company out of California. Unlike the Gill Freightlines business,
without an S.
That carrier's addition of a factoring company, TQL then applied to both carriers with the correct one as the beneficiary. Luckily, after months of waiting and work, the payments for those loads ultimately did arrive, not without plenty in the way of fits and starts. An annoyance, however.
That's why I got so fed up with brokerages, over the course of Convoy's collapse, that now, I don't think twice about QuickPay. I'm like, all right, let me get my money. At least I know I got something versus nothing. Last week, I was like, I wish the industry does a shakedown where we don't have to rely on brokerages anymore or as much. I do hope shippers are more open to giving work to direct carriers. Who cares if we're a 5-truck operation? At least you know who we are. We know who you guys are. There's not going to be an issue about identity, about double brokering, stolen freight. Like if my yard, for example, we're in Manteca, correct? Mm-hmm. And right down from our terminal is a Ford factory. It's a plant. I think they ship out parts or whatever the case that they have, right? I can see them physically. They can see me physically. But yet where it confuses me is they would rather give work to these, kids out of college who work for Coyote in Chicago or in Atlanta, wherever their office is, and trust these kids to go vet these carriers who might be carriers or chameleon carriers to haul their product, but they won't give it to me because I have 5 trucks only and I'm down the street.
And you can see them when you walk out at your front door. Yeah.
Yes, and they could see us. They could see us literally hauling their product every day.
Yep.
So this whole motto, it amazes me that this is, we'd rather do this in distribution than work with people who are right at your front doors. And yes, it is some of the carrier's fault. It is our fault. We should go knock on their door every day of the week. We should invest in what does a brokerage company offer more than a carrier? They offer you 24/7 phone call center support. All right, so let me go find 2 Filipinos in the Philippines that can work 24 hours. All right, let me go talk to MacroPoint and say, hey, how much would a subscription cost if I needed to track my shipments? Good, great. Here, it doesn't cost much. So what more does a brokerage offer than a carrier would? Like a larger network, right? Okay, well, don't give the carrier all your guys' freight. Hey, if I go to Ford and I say, I want to run your guys' lane from Manteca to Salt Lake City. I see you guys have 3 loads a week because I get those 3 loads a week from C.H. Robinson. I would like to be a carrier for that lane. Why can't they divvy it up into lanes? Sure. Why does it have to be that Coyote gets everything from that? Yes, it is easier, right? It is easier to find one brokerage who's branded and who can do this and do that and fancy gizmos. They have everything in the world but their assets. They have everything in the world. They have, these guys who went to college. I didn't go to college, but they have these kids. I'm not that much older, but I'm almost 30 now, and I speak to somebody who just got out of college, and he's like, yeah, I got the load for you, man, and it's paying $120 a mile. Can you take it for us? Can you take it for us? I feel disrespected. This numbnut just left college while he was partying at a fraternity. Now he's trying to sell me freight where I'm doing it for a passion. This is my passion. My father's photo is on the back of our equipment. I got drivers with a pregnant wife, drivers with kids. It's like, you want to sit here and sell me this baloney? Get out of here, Pisses me off. It's irritating.
I then referenced an edition of Overdrive Radio we ran just a few weeks ago. Veritable sermon 2021 Overdrive Small Fleet champ Jason Cowan delivered at the Mid-America Trucking Show in March. All about building and maintaining the relationships that will sustain your business. Relationships, that is, not just with customers, but that was certainly a big part of it. Find a link to that episode in the show notes for this podcast for April 29th, 2024. Jason Cowan's Silver Creek Transportation grew from 1 to 10 to 12 trucks without even a single direct written contract with shippers in his area of Henderson, Kentucky. How'd he do it? Simply by establishing a personal connection with the traffic managers for those shippers and being their safety valve when other carriers fell through. Or brokers, that is. Over time, that all led to contracts, to repeat business, and ever greater stability for the fleet, now up and over 30 trucks.
With all the analytics out nowadays, and I know, like this new carrier setup portal, gohighway.com or go.highway, whatever that's called. And it's really a pain in the ass. First of all, it's ridiculous when you partner with, new carrier or new brokers through Go Highway. They want to have ELD integration, and if your ELD provider, that's another scam. I think this industry is, you got to pay. Not only are you paying your ELD folks for their ELD services, now you got to pay extra if you want to do sharing. First couple of months, I didn't budge. I'm like, I'm not paying you guys an extra $200 a year just to share my data with a broker. But as more and more of the people that I booked freight with started going to Go Highway, I was like, all right, it's gonna be a problem. I can't close that many doors for myself. We're not that big yet, right? We're still a key component of the load boards. So we partnered with our ELD, gave them integration, paid them the money, and got all that gizmo done with Go Highway. But now there's all this access. Who's using this data?
Right.
Somebody's seeing it. Somebody's putting two and two together. So why can't these big, and I'm sure they do, these big facilities, big players like Ford, Del Monte, you name it, Costco. I'm sure whatever region they have their DCs, there should be an analytics of how many carriers are registered in that Pacific radius.
No.
Safer offers everything nowadays. You go on Safer, you could see everybody's everything. You could see a carrier's inspections, what they were put out of service for. So why aren't those analytics being used to source local carriers, versus, once again, going to these brokers who are sitting in Illinois or somewhere far away? I feel like it would be more beneficial to these shippers to use local carriers just because of its ease of business. You're not having to call and go through lines of, avenues of people, let me transfer you to my supervisor. Let me transfer you to that department. No, it should be, hey, Gill Freightlines, 0.1 block away from our terminal. Where's your truck at? Oh, yeah, I could see him rolling in. Perfect. That's a nice, like that would be nice.
As long as he doesn't mistake you for the other, the singular Gill Freightlines.
Right. Well, they're in drayage, so they would have a 40-foot container.
Yeah, right.
That's true, but I was telling
Alex Lockey, Gill's talking about there. Overdrive executive editor and the reporter behind much of the coverage of the ongoing fallout from Convoy's collapse.
I was telling Alex, and my wife, she's in the Air Force, and her family's in businesses like gas stations and liquor stores. So when I told them, I don't even vent to them anymore because they're like, well, what are you still doing in trucking? Leave. It's like, no, I didn't join. To me it was passion. I did it because my father, to honor him. I'm not leaving due to some bad apples like Convoy and the way the industry is right now. I want to see a change, and I want to be there for it. I don't want to join after the change. I want to help make the change. I want Alex to write an article, probably 2028, when he finally makes a headline saying FMCSA or shippers are now using more carriers than brokers. Brokerages are shutting down. I want to see that change, and I want to be part of it. You know, I want people like Convoy and their head honchos to actually have to feel that burn we felt. And I want to and I want to see the Washington D.C. people who are in DOT and FMCSA. I would love them to drive this change. That hey, in the next coming years, you want to be a brokerage, you better have $5 million cash submitted to this bond. That if you guys go belly up, you're going to take care of the people that put in the work for you to be, you know, this billion-dollar corporation like TQL is or C.H. Robinson is. We should really hold them like, oh, you really want to be a broker? Well, then put your money where your brand is. You know, why are, you know, and then you got states like California where, oh, it's a clean truck check program. Now you got to go smog your trucks. Jesus.
Right.
You know, we're paying more every year for these dumb programs, and we're not being, you know, compensated enough. When I book a load with, you know, for example, I'm saying C.H. Robinson, hopefully they don't think I'm talking crap about them. They're actually, you know, one of the nicer people we do work with. But it's like they base their fuel surcharge, and it's called nationwide. But the load I'm doing is California to California.
Yeah.
So the nationwide fuel surcharge is probably 22% or whatever, because states like New Jersey or New Mexico, for example, it's like $3.50 for a gallon of diesel. But I'm doing a load California to California, and I'm having to pay $5.50. Yes. Yeah. So it's like, what the hell? I should have a California fuel surcharge, not a nationwide surcharge. You know, so we're getting nationwide money, but we're subjected to, my gosh, these insane costs.
Carriers are no doubt smarter than brokers about accounting for operational costs. If you don't have room to negotiate the line haul rate up to account for the inadequacy of a national fuel surcharge on a California load like that, you're most definitely in a bind. That said, many carriers approach surcharges on a regional or even lane-by-lane basis, dynamically. As with tracking and ELD integration and other things Gill's mentioned, the technology exists to know that information with a great amount of certainty, week by week by week, as most any conscious owner-operator well knows. Fundamentally, Gill comes back to this.
I would like it to be more carrier-centric, and I think the load board creation or the use of brokers was more created to facilitate owner-operators and one or two truck operators, right? That they don't have enough to go, you know, to Costco and said, give me all your work from point A to point B, and I'll cover every single one of them, right? So I do think it was created for people like us, but now it's became something, you know, it's spun off into what it is now.
Right.
It's like we're bottom feeders. Whatever mega carriers can't cover, then it gets sent to mega brokers, and mega brokers take their cuts because they're driven like the Wolf of Wall Street people. You know, you follow a script. You'll call on this lane, and they'd be like, hey, how about this load, that 300-mile round trip? All right, we can only pay you $200. I'm like, all right, dude, good luck. 3 hours later, it's still sitting on the load board, and they've only went up $25. 4 hours later, they're still sitting on the load board, and they'll be like, oh, my absolute best is $50 more. All right, now it's 30 minutes to go till the load picks up, and then now they'll post it for $900. It's like, Jesus, why can't we, you know, why do we have to sit there and play these negotiation games and these games of, it's capitalism, right? That's the answer I get from TQL or Coyote when I ask them these questions. It's like, or you guys could just put your best rate, take your margin, your cut, and actually do put your best foot forward, so you're not making people like us go out of business. Because one day, with all these companies closing down, there's not going to be much left. What are you going to do then? Yeah, I mean, you know, we've been fortunate to have worked with brokers that are fair, right? And they know who they are, and they know us, that if they post a load or they send me an email, I don't even question it. All right, we'll take it. Thank you for being fair. You know, they've clearly made their money, and they're passing on. You know, it shouldn't be a trickling down effect, right? It shouldn't be like the filter down coffee. Yeah, there should be a load board for direct shippers to carriers. And I get it. Like a big distribution center doesn't want to sit there and have a fleet of employees just working on negotiating rates, right? They want to have one bid submitted and have a one-stop shop and leave that headache for somebody else because it creates more overhead for them. Yeah. They'd rather have people on forklifts stocking and loading versus sitting there and haggling with people like me, right? That's why they offer these lanes to big brokers. But, like I said, I guess more of it is created. This was state of the industry. Yes, the FMCSA needs to do their thing. The Washington, D.C. folks need to revamp some laws, but it does fall a lot on small carriers like us to just keep knocking on the door. That gentleman's example you gave me, very good example. We need to keep doing that. Hey, here's my number, Mr. Supervisor and shipping coordinator. And in case C.H. Robinson fails you, I'm the guy down the street. I'll drive over and pick up your load. Let us know. It's a good tactic.
Be the change in the end. We've got good examples throughout trucking history, of course. Jason Cowan and I'd wager now and into the future, Surinder Gill and his Gill Freightlines small fleet. Later this week, keep an eye out for the opening of the entry period for Overdrive's Small Fleet Championship, open to fleets of 3 to 30 trucks and culminating with a trip for 4 finalists to Nashville, Tennessee, for the conference of program sponsor, the National Association of Small Trucking Companies, early November. The ultimate winners are named there, and trophies are the vaunted title belts for winners in 2 categories by size of the fleet, 3 to 10 trucks and 11 to 30 trucks. Find the initial entry form at overdriveonline.com/2024 SFC. That's Small Fleet Champ. 2024, capital SFC. Here's a big thanks for listening. Overdrive Radio is a production of Overdrive, the voice of the American trucker. Edited and produced by me, Todd Dills, with the acoustic guitar and other support of trucker songwriter Long Haul Paul Marhofer. The theme is Legend of the Snake Man by Marhofer, featuring the guitar work of Travis, the Snake Man himself, Whammock. Terry Two Socks Richardson on bass, keys by Tishomingo Jim Whitehead, and on drums, Andrew Marshall. The podcast is backed up further by Overdrive's own news editor Matt Cole, executive editor Alex Lockie, video editors Lawson Rudisell and Mr. Andrew Glenn, and brand new to the team, social media coordinator Jasmine Campbell. See you next time.